What if I told you that one single game saved an entire company from collapse? A studio on the brink of financial ruin, a desperate gamble, and a game that reshaped an entire genre. This is the story of Persona 3. Today, Atlus stands tall among the giants of the gaming industry, with Shin Megami Tensei, Persona, and the highly anticipated metaphor Refantasio dominating the RPG scene. But none of this would have been possible if not for a bold, risky move in the mid-2000s, one that could have been Atlus's final mistake or its greatest triumph. How did Persona 3 pull the studio back from the edge of bankruptcy and redefine its future? Stick with me, because the answer will surprise you. Atlus has been shaping the RPG landscape for nearly 4 decades, but its journey began in a much different place. In its early years, the studio focused on adapting the works of Japanese author Aya Nishitani, bringing his digital Devil Story series to life through Megami Tensei on the NES. This marked the foundation of what would later become one of the most influential RPG franchises in gaming history. As the industry evolved, so did Atlus. The release of Shin Megami Tensei on the Super Nintendo introduced a darker, more complex RPG experience that quickly gained a devoted following in Japan. While other major studios like Enix and Square dominated the genre, Atlus carved out its own identity, pushing the boundaries of storytelling and gameplay. Despite its influence, many of its titles remained locked in Japan, never officially localized for Western audiences. At the time, translating and distributing games internationally was an expensive and risky endeavor, something only a handful of major publishers could afford. Companies like Nintendo occasionally stepped in to handle localization, but they claimed a significant share of the profits, making it difficult for smaller studios like Atlus to justify the cost. By the late 90s, Atlus had expanded its reach with various spin-offs, exploring new ideas and gameplay mechanics. Then, in 1997, it made a bold move, Persona, a fresh take on the Shin Megami Tensei formula, launched on the PlayStation. With Sony offering better support for third-party developers than Nintendo, Atlus saw an opportunity to bring its games to a global audience. However, things didn't go as planned. The Western release of Persona was a disaster. The localization team made drastic changes to the game, altering character designs, names, and even the setting in an attempt to appeal to an American audience. The result was a version that felt disconnected from its original vision, alienating potential fans and leaving a poor first impression. Unlike franchises such as Final Fantasy, which had successfully captured the Western market, Persona failed to make an impact. It wasn't until years later, with the PSP remake, that the first Persona finally received the faithful localization it deserved. But at that point, the damage had already been done. Atlus had learned a hard lesson. Breaking into the Western market was more complicated than just translating a game. It required an understanding of the audience, a respect for the original material, and a well-executed strategy. Persona 2 improved on the foundation of its predecessor, refining the gameplay and deepening its narrative. However, its Western release was far from ideal. The game was split into 2 parts, Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment, but only the latter was officially localized for the PlayStation. The decision to leave Innocent Sin exclusive to Japan stemmed from concerns over its themes and potential censorship issues. Atlus feared that certain aspects of the story would not sit well with Western audiences, leading them to withhold half of the experience. This move confused players and limited the game's reach outside of Japan. Despite this, Eternal Punishment still managed to gain some attention. Those who played it recognized its depth and saw the potential in the Persona series. But Atlus's hesitation meant that the franchise was struggling to establish itself internationally. Unlike Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, which had already built strong fan bases worldwide, Persona remained a niche title with an uncertain future.
Let's go, everybody!
As the gaming industry transitioned from the PlayStation to the PlayStation 2, Atlus shifted its focus back to Shin Megami Tensei. The early 2000s saw the release of Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, a critically acclaimed RPG that showcased the studio's strengths. Alongside it came Digital Devil Saga, another ambitious spin-off that pushed storytelling and gameplay mechanics further. However, while these games were praised by fans and critics, they struggled commercially. Atlus was pouring resources into high-quality projects, but the financial returns weren't meeting expectations. To make things worse, Japan was going through a severe economic downturn. Many companies, including game developers, faced major financial instability, and Atlus was no exception. The combination of underperforming sales and the broader economic crisis put the studio in a precarious position. They needed a hit, something that could break out of the niche RPG space and attract a much wider audience. The answer? A bold reinvention of Persona. A game that would take everything that had come before, refine it, and introduce a fresh identity that could finally propel Atlus into the mainstream. Before we continue, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying this content and want to support the channel, there's an easy way to help without spending anything extra. Down in the description, you'll find affiliate links to Amazon and other partners. Whenever you click on one of those links and make a purchase, whether it's a game, a console, or even something completely unrelated, a small percentage goes towards supporting the channel. It's a simple way to help keep this content coming, and I truly appreciate it. Now, let's get back to the story. Atlus was at a breaking point. Financially unstable and struggling to find an audience beyond its niche fanbase, the studio needed something revolutionary. That responsibility fell on the shoulders of a new generation of developers. Fresh minds, determined to change the fate of Persona and, by extension, Atlus itself. Leading the charge was Katsura Hashino, who took on the role of director and writer. His vision was clear. Persona needed to evolve beyond its Shin Megami Tensei roots, appealing to a broader audience while maintaining its signature depth. But innovation wasn't just about narrative. Shoji Meguro, the composer, set out to craft a unique sound that blended rock, pop, and hip-hop, creating an atmosphere that would instantly set Persona 3 apart. And then there was Shigenori Soejima, whose bold character designs and vibrant art direction gave the game an identity unlike anything Atlus had done before. Despite their ambitions, the road to reinvention wasn't easy. Internally, there was resistance. Atlus had always catered to hardcore RPG fans who expected deep, challenging mechanics and darker storytelling. The idea of changing the formula was met with skepticism. What if longtime fans rejected this new direction? What if they alienated their existing audience and failed to attract new players? The risks were enormous. Hashino, however, refused to back down. He knew that playing it safe wasn't an option. Persona 3 had to be different. It had to be something that not only retained the heart of the series, but also introduced fresh elements that could captivate a wider audience. After much debate, Atlus's leadership gave the green light, trusting the team to take the franchise into uncharted territory. Before Persona 3, the series was deeply rooted in the dark psychological atmosphere of Shin Megami Tensei. Its themes were heavy, its storytelling complex, and its audience mostly made up of hardcore RPG fans who appreciated deep strategy and mature narratives. While this approach had its strengths, it also limited the franchise's appeal. Atlus needed Persona 3 to reach a broader audience without abandoning the depth that made its games unique. The first major shift came in the game's presentation. Instead of the muted, ominous tones of previous titles, Persona 3 introduced a vibrant, stylish aesthetic. Shigenori Soejima reimagined the series' art direction, incorporating bright colors and modern character designs that immediately stood out. This wasn't just a cosmetic change, it was a deliberate move to make the world feel more immersive and engaging for a younger audience. But the most groundbreaking addition was the introduction of the social link system. This mechanic fundamentally changed how players experienced the story. Instead of focusing solely on dungeon crawling and turn-based combat, Persona 3 allowed players to step into the shoes of a high school student, building relationships and balancing daily life with supernatural battles. Every friendship formed in the game had a direct impact on gameplay, influencing character growth and battle abilities. This wasn't just a gimmick. It was a system that created emotional investment, making players care about the people in this world in a way most RPGs never had. The game's signature mechanic, the Evoker, was perhaps its boldest and riskiest creative decision. Instead of the traditional summoning style seen in other RPGs, characters in Persona 3 would summon their personas by pointing a gun-like object to their heads and pulling the trigger. This symbolic act was meant to represent overcoming fear and embracing one's true self. But it was also a shocking visual that sparked debate. Some critics and players saw it as too extreme, while others praised it for its raw, artistic depth. Ultimately, this decision cemented Persona 3 as a game unafraid to challenge conventions, blending its heavy subject matter with addictive gameplay that kept players emotionally invested in both the story and its mechanics. The beauty of this approach was that it made the heavy themes of Persona 3 more accessible. The game still explored complex topics like mortality, existential dread, and personal growth, but it did so in a way that was relatable. Players saw themselves in these characters, in their struggles, their friendships, and their moments of self-discovery. It was this connection that elevated Persona 3 beyond just another RPG. It became an experience. Games like Fire Emblem Three Houses adopted similar relationship-building mechanics to deepen player engagement, while titles like Tokyo Xanadu drew inspiration from Persona 3's mix of school life and supernatural battles. Despite its ambitious vision, Persona 3 wasn't a massive budget production. In fact, compared to Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne and Digital Devil Saga, its resources were far more limited. But what it lacked in funding, it made up for with innovation and bold ideas. The risk paid off. Persona 3 wasn't just a success, it was a turning point. It redefined what the series could be and laid the groundwork for Persona 4 and Persona 5, which would go on to achieve even greater heights. When Persona 3 launched, followed by its expanded version, Persona 3 FES, in 2007, their combined sales exceeded 1 million copies. For a company that had been on the brink of collapse, this was a financial turning point. The game generated over $39 million in revenue, giving Atlus the breathing room it desperately needed to continue operating. Persona 3 FES wasn't just an updated version of the game, it was an expansion that solidified its legacy. Alongside new features and improvements, it introduced The Answer, an epilogue that explored the aftermath of the original story. Unlike the main game, which balanced its darker themes with moments of levity and personal growth, The Answer fully embraced the weight of loss, regret, and the struggle to move forward. It provided closure to lingering questions, but at the cost of a grueling challenge. With no social links and a relentless combat-driven structure, The Answer felt like a test of endurance, forcing players to confront the harsh reality of the game's ending. Persona 3's success didn't stop with its original and Persona 3 FES release. In 2009, Atlus introduced Persona 3 Portable for the PSP, bringing major changes that made the game even more accessible. One of the most significant additions was the option to play as a female protagonist, offering a fresh perspective on the story, new social links, and slight variations in interactions. The streamlined gameplay, including direct control over party members, a feature later carried into Persona 4 and Persona 5, also helped refine the experience. With this version, Persona 3 reached an even wider audience, introducing many new players to the franchise. Without this success, Atlus would likely not have lasted long enough to be acquired by Sega years later, and the game's impact extended far beyond its initial sales. It proved that the Persona series had mainstream appeal, shaping how the studio approached game development moving forward. The influence of Persona 3 can still be felt today in modern titles like Metaphor Refantasio that owe a great deal to the foundation laid by Persona 3, proving that Atlus could evolve and compete with giants like Square Enix. In 2024, Persona 3 Reload brought this classic back to life, and for many, it was an introduction to a series that has changed the RPG landscape. When you look back at Atlus's journey, it's impossible to deny one thing: Persona 3 wasn't just important, it was essential.
You must stand aside. I won't miss! Psychic!
And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Persona 3? Did it shape your love for RPGs, or do you have another favorite entry in the series? Drop a comment below. We read and reply to every single one. Also, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. It really helps us bring more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.